Hello everyone, this is Bob and Threadbare, and welcome back to Threadbare Reviews. Today, we're going to take a look at a more modern film about First Contact, and go figure, but this one also includes a love story and a conflict between war and science. It's the 2016 film called Arrival, and it was the request of a new patron named Nicholas. The story about the story. Arrival began life as a short story written by Chinese-American author Ted Chiang. Chiang makes a living as a technical writer for software companies, but he sold the occasional science fiction short story starting in 1990. And although he isn't a prolific author, the works he does sell get a lot of attention. To date, he has won 4 Nebula Awards and 4 Hugo Awards, and one of those winners includes Story of Your Life, which is what Arrival is based on. It wasn't adapted immediately though, since the story first got published in 1998. The person most responsible for getting the adaptation started is the film's screenwriter, Eric Heiserer. Heiserer's career started in the 2000s, and his most notable scripts up until Arrival were horror films like the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, and the 2011 prequel of The Thing. During this period, he started reading Chiang's works, and was inspired to write a script based on Story of Your Life, partly because he liked it, and partly because it was a challenge for him to write something so non-linear. He shopped the script around for several years, but it wasn't until 2013 that he finally got enough success for someone to listen to his pitch. Heiserer got a producer on board, and they convinced a French-Canadian director named Denis Villeneuve to helm the project. Villeneuve was directing thrillers at the time like Prisoners and Sicario, but he wanted to get into science fiction directing, and he thought that this would be a good beginning. Heiserer and Villeneuve then wrote and rewrote the script a few more times, changing the plot considerably in the process, and ultimately they got 3 production companies led by 21 Labs Entertainment and Paramount Pictures to pay for the film. The lead of the film is Louise Banks, played by Amy Adams. Adams' first success was with Disney's mostly live-action musical, Enchanted. And while she played the naive ingenue for that film and then the next few, she moved on to more assertive parts starting in the 2010s. She's won several awards over the years and got more than a few nominations for Arrival. Opposite Adams is Jeremy Renner, playing Ian Donnelly. Renner is perhaps best recognized for playing Hawkeye in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but he's also had lead roles in films like The Hurt Locker and The Bourne Legacy. The supporting cast includes Forrest Whitaker, Michael Stuhlbarg, and C. Ma. Arrival had a solid performance with both the critics and the box office, getting an international profit of $203.4 million from a $47 million budget. Critics liked the way that the film challenged the audience, while also maintaining a high level of tension that could keep their attention without resorting to cheap thrills. But then why don't we see it for ourselves? The review. 12 alien ships come to Earth at seemingly random spots across the globe, and while they don't leave their ships, they allow humans to come inside and interact with them at regular intervals. One vessel lands in Montana, and so the American Army brings in linguist Louise Banks and physicist Ian Donnelly to be the civilian heads of their first contact efforts. The going is slow at first, but Louise eventually discovers that the aliens, called heptapods because they have 7 limbs, don't have a spoken language, but they can communicate by using complex visual symbols. Louise slowly figures out the aliens' language, and as she does so, she starts to have visions of watching her daughter grow up and then die of a rare disease as a teenager. A daughter she does not yet have, mind you. Eventually, she gets to the point of asking the heptapods why they're here, and they respond by saying to make all into one and to give or possibly to use a weapon. Louise's military bosses think that this means they want human nations to fight each other until only one is left, and the Chinese, who also got the message, agree with them and threaten to destroy the alien ships. However, Louise thinks it's a misunderstanding, and she goes to see the heptapods one last time to clear things up. They explain that the weapon is their language, because mastering it allows a person to see every moment of their lives, past and future. They're giving it to humans because 3,000 years from now, they'll need our help. Louise then uses her future knowledge to call the Chinese Commander-in-Chief's private cell phone and recite the last words of his dead wife. and although they aren't translated in the film, the words are, "War does not make winners, only widows." Thanks to that, China stands down, the heptapods leave peacefully, and all the governments agree to share their partial knowledge of the heptapod language. The sound and visual design of this movie are above and beyond what I was expecting. The appearance of the heptapods and their ships are eerie and unsettling without being actively threatening, and the aliens in particular are an unsettling mix of foreign and familiar. Their heads have vaguely human-like divots where the eyes should be, and the limbs are a cross between octopus tentacles and human knuckles. As for the audio, I could hear a level of bass I could feel in my chest, and I was wearing headphones. Between that and the soundtrack, I was seriously impressed. The story is presented non-linearly, but it's fairly easy to follow even if you don't understand what's going on. Most of the non-linear asides are interactions between Louise and her daughter Hannah, and they illustrate what Louise is going through without adding extra plot elements to confuse things. Later on, when she starts seeing other future times and places, it's because she's using her new ability to resolve the main plotline. I personally wouldn't have minded seeing more experimentation, but then of course that would have had less audience appeal, and so I can understand why they went with a light touch. Just like with Starman, there's a conflict in this film between the explorer and the conqueror. But an interesting change in this film is that we get a lot of asides about the public response to alien contact, and a lot of that response is panicking, rioting, and demands to attack or otherwise show force. In other words, the general public is demanding the conqueror response, while the ones arguing for peace seem to be few and far between. I'm really not sure if this is a cultural shift, a difference between creators, or just an acknowledgement of the dark energy humans have when they start to panic. Regardless, it's one of those things that I hope would go better in real life if this happened, but I worry would go just as badly or worse than how it's portrayed in Arrival. Ultimately, the whole movie hangs together really well, and every last scene serves the plot and the themes. It's a really well-made movie with an interesting point to make, and so I strongly recommend that everyone take some time and watch it. The analysis. The reasoning behind using a language to master time is based on the real-life Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. The idea is that the limitations of a language can determine how your mind thinks and how it processes information. For instance, a language with more words for snow can better describe the weather conditions than English, and would therefore condition a native speaker to pay more attention to snow and cold weather. However, this hypothesis is rooted in the racism and ethnocentrism of late 19th century Europe, and it's mostly at odds with modern linguistics, which point out that people invent or borrow new words whenever they need something more descriptive to explain themselves. As an example of that, the Hawaiian words for lava flows are regularly used by modern geologists and volcanologists, and English in general is full of loanwords that help us more precisely describe what it is we're talking about. Now, with all that being said, the hypothesis is just a means to the film's end, a scientific name the creators can slap onto what's otherwise a magical ability to see the future. And I don't mind that, because while Arrival has several themes, the main one is all about this future vision. By the end of the main plot, Louise is able to see her daughter Hannah's life from start to finish, from the day she's born to the day she dies. Despite knowing the tragedy of that ending, however, Louise chooses to have her because of all the joys and all the beauty Hannah is able to bring to her life, and to all the people who get to know her. The good of Hannah's life outweighs the bad, and in the end, even the tragedy of her death has a kind of beauty and meaning to it. That's the main theme of the movie. The idea that life can have a greater meaning, in spite of the fact that it ends, and perhaps also because it ends. Incidentally, while we humans may never be able to predict our own lives, there is a way in which we experience nonlinear time regularly, and Arrival is itself an example. Stories exist outside of our personal timelines, and while we often experience them in chronological order, that's not always the case. Stories are sometimes told out of order, And even the Odyssey, one of the oldest written stories that we know about, uses flashbacks and framing devices. Then there's the fact that when you reread a book or rewatch a film, or when someone tells you the ending before you begin, like I just did for Arrival, you will know how the story ends even as it begins. As a matter of fact, Arrival does this to itself. The first scenes of the film are all about Hannah's life and death. What all of this means is that humans are intimately familiar with nonlinear time despite the fact that we don't really know what our own future holds. We can keep the beginnings and endings of stories in our minds at the same time, and certain variations of dramatic irony rely on this ability. So both the theme and presentation of Arrival have very practical applications, whether it's for our own lives, for the lives of the people we know and love, or for the stories we consume, both fiction and non-fiction. Even if the ending is tragic, even if death comes for a loved one before we're ready, the journey is still worth the effort. The price of living is pain, but the value of life is worth paying that price. And even the pain can teach us something important. Just like last time, today's film gives us the inverted version of the recurring theme for this series. With the film's main theme in mind, I believe the sentence should go something like this: embrace the unknown in spite of your fears, and in spite of your pain, for the wisdom you gain from understanding the unknown is worth whatever the price you pay. Thanks for joining me again for today's Threadbare review, and I hope I'll see you next time. Until then, please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and if you have a little extra money to spare, you can support me on Patreon. Link in the description.